Welcome to the Workplace Wellbeing Essentials Series. I'm Mari Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Advancing Wellness. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to this expert interview where we explore topics that impact employee well-being. My guest today is Leslie Saul. Leslie founded Leslie Saul and Associates over 25 years ago. With a background in architecture, interior design, and painting, Leslie brings an artistic and logical approach to problem solving. In over 30 years of professional practice, she has been responsible for designing more than 8 million square feet of space. Her projects have won local, national, and international recognition and awards. Leslie's also an active and dedicated volunteer for community and industry organizations. Leslie, I'm so excited to have you here today for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Mari.
Well, here we are in 2020, and boy, what a year it has been. This has been a landmark year in so many ways. Our lives have been disrupted by a pandemic. We're in the midst of dealing with working from home, children out of school, and the midst of a political election that is rocking our nation. This has impacted not only the way we work, but where we work. Today, we'll explore the built work environment with Leslie from the architect's viewpoint and talk about the transformation that workplaces are going through. Leslie, why don't we start with this idea of how the world of work has been disrupted and requiring employers to send their employees home to work. Let's talk about those pluses and minuses of working from home.
So I'm right at home, but I did prepare some pluses and minuses because I think it's interesting. For every con, there's a pro. So, and not everyone has the same pros and cons, but some of the cons are we feel isolated from our coworkers and the world. One of the things our firm has done is to institute a daily check-in call, which I think has made people feel better. But the pro is we don't have to deal with a soul-killing commute. And we get more hours to work or more hours to do whatever we want to do. Another con is that when we were in the office, we used to be able to just run into each other or wave a hand and get a connection with someone. And now collaboration is more difficult because it has to be planned. But the technology is amazing, and that's the pro, that we've learned how to work remotely pretty well. It's kind of amazing. Even us, in our field where we actually want to look at samples together with clients. Mm-hmm. And I think people are starting to get more comfortable with a tiny meeting. But before, I would say this month, people wanted to meet remotely, even to review samples. And that was a whole big deal. But anyway, I feel like we figured it out a little bit. That's a pro. The con I have here about no regular supervision. You don't have someone in your office who has maybe more experience, even if they're not your official supervisor, who can help you answer questions. But the pro of that is that you can work when is good for you. So you might be doing your spreadsheets at midnight instead of at 10 a.m. And one of the big issues for me as a designer is that our home setups are not as ergonomic as our office setups were. Now, we've encouraged some of our clients who actually call us about it to, if they are working 100% from home, bring your ergonomic chair home. So we're talking about acoustics. The space isn't necessarily good at home. We may be cold, hot, whatever. On the other hand, when we're at home, we don't have to just work in one spot. We can pick up our laptop and our phone, and we are mobile. We can sit on the back porch, and one of our employees actually checked in on the daily call from her porch. Why not? We could hear chickens clucking in the background, by the way. And so that kind of brings up the distraction issue that I know a lot of people have talked about. One of the cons of working from home is there are dishes in the sink. The floor in the kitchen could use a cleaning. The kids want help with the homework. The mail just came, which I can see right from this chair when he comes. That kind of distraction that you didn't have when you were in the office. The office, you were office. Home, you're in this both land. And on the other hand, we have more time for healthy activities. again, that's partly because of the commute time, but also we're thinking about cooking from home because we're not going out as much. So we're thinking about healthy eating. At least a lot of my friends are. We're sharing recipes of things that we probably would not have done before, things that are more complicated, that take more time. So I think one of the unhealthy aspects of working from home is that people don't know when to stop.
Mm.
And we've heard about a lot of people who just are working. Whereas at the office, people start leaving at 5 or 6 o'clock. You go, oh, it's the end of the day, I should go. And we found that particularly a problem with people who are living alone. They just don't have that other people saying, come on already,
Yeah,
dinner
time to eat, time to walk the dog, whatever it might be.
But the good news about working from home is that we are less exposed to the virus. So the decision to send us home was a good idea. It is less healthy. And the one con that I think nobody really thinks about, but my clients are starting to think about, is security. So security, I think people understand that we're at home, our Wi-Fi hopefully is secure, but some of us might be going on the back porch and we might be picking up someone else's Wi-Fi connection, and we might be exposing our data to others that we may not be able to. And even in our home office, we might not have a locked file cabinet. We have dogs and cats who can, walk all over your papers necessarily. So I think we ought to talk about security. We ought to think about security, at least when we're talking about working from home. But the positive is the sun is shining outside, and I can just go take a walk in the neighborhood whenever I want to, and I don't have to plan that either. So I do see pros and cons, and I see a future where we're going to have hybrid work. We're going to have people working from home, and we're going to have people working at the office. And so what I've been thinking about is how do we make the office a place we want to be and a place that protects us?
Well, that's a great transition to my next question, which has to do with, I'm curious about when you're designing a workplace, how do you think about the well-being of the occupants, of the employees who are going to live in that space, that time? How do you think about that when you're designing the space?
I think it's changed. I would say, especially in the last month, we've had our office corporate clients call us and say, okay, we're going to close the lounge, we're going to close the kitchens, we're going to, but we have these people sitting across from each other. I guess we can put glass up between people, but then we have the people side to side. Do we need glass on the sides? Are we putting everyone in little glass boxes? I heard from a friend that she is in the middle of designing an entire office of little itty bitty offices. So 80-inch high offices for everyone. Everyone's going to have their own little pod. Well, I remember offices with 80-inch high panels because I've lived long enough. And there used to be at Digital Equipment Company, if anyone remembers DEC, they were out in Littleton or Maynard.
Yeah.
And all the cubes were huge, by the way, which, they were 8 by 8, which no one would do anymore today,
Right.
80 inches tall. And you literally felt like a mouse in a maze when you went. And they had signage, everything had a number. It was like going to MIT with the numbers and letters. You have corridor buildings have numbers at MIT. So that isn't, I don't think that's really pleasant. And yes, they're saying they're making them all out of glass, but then I'm in a zillion fish bowls. So I think that, yes, that may help stop transmission of virus. And maybe that is our priority number one. But I think that all of these efforts to make us safe from COVID are not making it more pleasant and make us feel better when we're at work. I'm not sure that people are really going to feel that wearing masks is enough. And I is kind of jumping ahead to one of my points I wanted to make later, but it just popped in my head, which is we also have cleaning protocols that have been established. where every night they're coming through and they're fog bombing and the whole space. And what we've discovered is there are some bad chemicals being used in these fogs, including pesticides. And we just don't even want to know about that. And the more we learn about this virus, we're thinking that the transmission by touch is lower than we first thought. You know, we used to wipe all our groceries down. Do you wipe your groceries down anymore? No. We get it home, we put it away, and whatever. And so I'm worried about, in our effort to make everything super safe, which I appreciate, I'm not saying we shouldn't be safe, we are doing things that maybe are not good for our health, such as the way we're sanitizing, and totally not good for our well-being.
So how do you balance this need for safety, infrastructure, aesthetics, creating connection? How do you balance all of that when you're designing these spaces?
Answer, which I think that we as people need human connection. We need connection with nature, which includes plants and animals. We need to bring nature into our offices. We need to have views of nature. We actually went through a process with a software company, healthcare software company, is amazing, as a matter of fact, but out in the suburbs. And they asked their employees, we were part of evaluating where should we go. And they did not want to move from the suburbs because they loved how they looked out the window at trees. And one of their goals for their space was to make a healthier space. And what's interesting about that space is not only did we introduce real plants in a very low budget, we sacrificed some things to get that, but we also did make a little more separation than, the monks. I call it the monks copying the Bible, where it's one big table and everyone's just open air. People had a sense of place. They had their own space, which I know that's not trendy these days. People are talking about unassigned workspaces. I think if we're trying to make people feel connected, they need to feel connected to people. They need to feel connected to the work itself, to the team members that they work with. So we have to do the things that foster that connection with people and with the brand. So if the brand is all about healthcare software, right? They're software for healthcare, then doesn't the space need to reflect not just their logo and colors, official branding, but like, who are they? What are they about? And if they're about health and well-being, then maybe we should make the interiors reflect that.
Well, you would certainly hope so, because I think that's going to not only communicate the brand, but it's going to give the employees more of a connection to that brand in the work that they're doing.
Right. And when you're connected, you feel engaged, and that whole Gallup poll about we're not feeling engaged anymore. But I think in some ways we are, and they're doing a pretty good job, I think, at the brand level. The Hancock sponsoring the marathon, you start to say, oh, I like working for the Hancock. They sponsor the marathon. These are things that people make that feel good about the brands. I think the brands are pretty good at that. I'm not sure they're really good on the smaller level. And I actually want to rethink everything really in the office. What is a conference room? What's the point of it? A big table in the middle of a room with whiteboards around it. Why? Why are we thinking that way? Maybe it's a group of people who work together in a big room with their desks around the perimeter, and the whiteboards are in the middle where we can work across from each other and somehow see each other and write notes to. I don't know. I don't know what it will be, the answer, but I want to think about it fresh. And I think that could lead to better workspaces for everyone.
Excellent. Let's continue this thought process around connection. Connection is one of the core elements of our well-being model and number of well-being models that exist in our universe. And I'm curious as to how you design a workspace, especially given some of the constraints that we're now experiencing. How do you design the workspace for connection and collaboration so people can come together in meaningful ways?
And I think that's really the crux of it. You're separating people to save their lives, including home and at work with big glass partitions, whatever. And then we're also saying, well, I want to feel connected, and I need to feel connected. So I have this crazy idea that I'm going to share for the first time here, so you can tell me I'm insane, but
bring it on.
I'm thinking that the classic way we've been organizing office space for years, I've been doing this for 40 years, more than 40 years actually. And the first thing you do is who works with whom, and then where does that group, who do they have to work with? Because we want to make people feel like there's some synergy between all these groups and among the team itself. I have a whole new idea, which is we're in our little pods now, whether they're tall or just enough to cover our sneezes. And we are going to try to break big open spaces into smaller spaces, because I think that does help you make a connection. What if instead of sitting next to the person who's working with you on this big presentation for the investors, you actually are working remotely with that person? You're both in the office, but you're working remotely. Why? Because you're sitting next to the person who shares your love of baking or basketball or beer. And so we sit people according to affinity groups rather than work groups. So we're in the office, so we can have one of those crazy meeting rooms I described where we have to sit for 3 weeks because this investor thing is done, and we're going to be in that room, like a war room, to get it done and be creative. But I also think when you think about it, if I sat next to a person who cared about wellness like you, and we talked about these issues that are important to us that may not really be our work, but it's important to us, we would feel this connection even across a glass screen. And I think that what we've learned about remote working could be applied to the office to create this sense, especially in these big companies that I know you're working with, self-made affinity groups. Not telling people that if you bake, you have, that's the official affinity groups. But I just have this feeling that we need that extra level to overcome these barriers, that literal barriers that we are putting into our office to keep us safe. Idea of the day.
Well, I love the idea of the day, so that's fabulous. And I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation. I think that a lot of employers are going to try different things, and they might try them simultaneously, and so that they can have a series of experiments and then assess which ones work best and which ones meet the needs of their employees while, keeping them healthy and keeping them productive.
I'm hoping.
That's great.
I want to be there. I want to try things.
I get it. I do too.
It's not going to work to just do it the way we've been doing it.
Totally agree. Yes, I think that's part of the reason we're going to be seeing so many changes and seeing a lot of experimentation.
And that's good. So let's do this again in a year and see what we've learned.
See what we've seen. Exactly. Leslie, if our audience wants to learn more about you and the work that you and your team are doing, where can they find you?
I am Leslie Saul, and my website is lesliesaul.com. And we have a small firm, and you can learn you can see our projects, but you can learn how we work as well. And I think we've simplified architecture also to 3 steps. I think people make it too complicated. So anyway, a little plug for us. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for being here today. As always, I love spending time with you.
Thanks, Mari.